In the dusty heart of the Wild West, where the sun scorched the earth like a branding iron and the wind whispered secrets through the sagebrush, lived a man named Harlan Thorpe. Harlan was the richest rancher in all of Montana Territory, his sprawling spread of cattle and land stretching farther than the eye could see. He was a towering figure with a mustache as thick as his wallet, known for his sharp deals and sharper tongue. But on this fateful evening in 1875, as the saloon in the sleepy town of Willow Creek buzzed with whiskey-fueled bravado, Harlan found himself at the center of a bet that would change everything. "I wager 50 head of my finest steers," slurred his rival, old Jeb Harlan, no relation, but a thorn in his side nonetheless, "that you couldn't charm that widow Eleanor Hayes into your bed for the night." The room erupted in laughter, glasses clinking like spurs on boots. Harlan, never one to back down from a challenge, slapped his hand on the bar. "Make it 100, Jeb. Easy have her story to tell by dawn." Little did he know, the real wager was on his own soul. Harlan rode out under the starlit sky, his horse kicking up dust along the trail to Eleanor's modest homestead on the outskirts of town. She was a mystery to most folks, a young widow whose husband, a prospector, had perished in a mine collapse 2 years prior. Rumors swirled about her, some said she was cursed, others that she was too proud to remarry. Harlan saw her as a conquest, a way to prove his prowess among the roughnecks. He arrived at her door with a bottle of fine bourbon tucked under his arm, his hat tipped low to hide the smirk. "Evening, ma'am," he drawled, his voice smooth as aged leather. "Name's Harlan Thorpe. Heard you might need some company on this lonesome night." Eleanor, with her auburn hair tied back and eyes like storm clouds, regarded him warily from the threshold. She was no fragile flower, life had hardened her edges. But something in his bold gaze, or perhaps the chill of the autumn air, made her step aside. "Come in if you must, me Thorpe. But mind your manners." The cabin was humble, lit by a single lantern that cast flickering shadows on the walls. A pot of stew simmered on the wood stove, filling the air with the scent of herbs and hardship. Harlan settled into a creaky chair, uncorking the bourbon with a flourish. He poured 2 glasses, sliding one toward her. "To new beginnings," he toasted, his eyes gleaming with intent. Eleanor took a sip, her hand steady despite the tremor in her heart. She wasn't naive, she knew men like Harlan, who viewed women as land to be claimed. But tonight, loneliness gnawed at her, and conversation was a rare luxury. They talked of the land first, the endless plains, the brutal winters, the dreams that drew folks west. Harlan boasted of his empire, how he'd built it from nothing but grit and gall. Eleanor listened, her responses measured, revealing little. As the bourbon flowed, so did his advances, a brush of his hand, a lingering glance. She didn't pull away entirely, but her words steered him elsewhere. "Tell me, me Thorpe, what drives a man like you? Is it the gold in your pockets or something deeper?" Harlan chuckled, leaning closer. The bet burned in his mind, urging him on. He spun tales of his conquests, both in business and bedrooms, painting himself as the untouchable king of the frontier. Eleanor poured another drink, her eyes softening not with desire, but with a quiet understanding. As midnight approached, the conversation shifted. Harlan, emboldened by the liquor, made his move, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that tasted of whiskey and wanderlust. She responded gently at first, then pulled back, her breath steady. "If this is what you seek," she whispered, "then stay. But know that dawn brings truths you might not want." Intrigued and arrogant, Harlan followed her to the bedroom, the bet's victory seeming assured. They lay together under the quilt, bodies entwined in the heat of the moment. But as passion faded into the quiet hours, sleep eluded them both. Instead, they talked, really talked, for the first time. It was in those vulnerable moments, with the moon casting silver light through the window, that Eleanor began to unravel her story. Harlan, expecting pillow talk of flattery or flirtation, listened idly at first. But her words soon pierced his haze. "My husband, Tom, wasn't just a miner," she said softly, her voice cracking like dry earth. "He was a dreamer. We came west with nothing but hope and a wagon. But after he died, I found out the truth about his final days." Harlan propped himself on an elbow, curiosity piqued. "What truth?" Eleanor turned to face him, her eyes glistening. "He'd struck gold, not much, but enough to change lives. I'd it away, not for us, but for something bigger. You see, Tom had seen too many orphans on these trails. Kids left behind by fever, riots, or just plain bad luck. He planned to build a home for them, a place where they could grow strong, away from the saloons and the savagery. Harlan froze, his body stiffening beside her. The word orphans echoed in his mind like a gunshot. He thought of his own past, buried deep under layers of wealth and bravado. As a boy, he'd been one of those lost souls, his parents claimed by cholera on the Oregon Trail, leaving him to fend for himself in the wilds. He'd clawed his way up, stealing, scheming, until he owned half the territory. But the scars remained, hidden behind his riches. "Why tell me this now?" he managed, his voice hoarse. Eleanor sat up, wrapping the sheet around her. "Because I see it in you, Harlan. That hunger, it's not for land or women. It's for something you lost long ago. Tom left me that gold, but not for my comfort. It was to finish what he started. I've been using it bit by bit, taking in strays, feeding them, teaching them. But it's running low, and the winters are cruel." The revelation hit Harlan like a stampede. This woman, whom he'd approached on a crude bet, wasn't a prize to be won, she was a beacon of selflessness in a world of takers. He thought of the bet, the laughter in the saloon, and shame washed over him. How many lives had he trampled in his pursuit of more? Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. "Last month, I took in little Sarah, barely 8, her folks killed by outlaws. She reminds me of what humanity can be, kind, even in pain. But without help, I can't keep going. The ranchers like you see us as burdens, not brothers." Harlan's mind raced. He envisioned the orphans he'd ignored, the widows he'd dismissed. In that moment, lying beside her, he saw his life for the farce it was, a hollow empire built on sand. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Harlan rose from the bed, his hands trembling. He dressed in silence, but instead of slipping away with a conqueror's grin, he turned to Eleanor. "I came here on a fool's errand," he admitted, his voice breaking for the first time in years. "A bet, to prove I could have you. But you've shown me what a real man is." Eleanor's eyes widened, but she said nothing, letting him speak. "That gold of yours, it's not enough. But my land is. I did you 100 acres, prime grazing, and build that home myself. For Tom, for those kids, for the boy I once was." Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of hope. Harlan pulled her into an embrace, not as a lover, but as a kindred spirit. The act wasn't just generosity, it was redemption. Word spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Harlan Thorpe, the iron-fisted rancher, had changed overnight. He honored the bet by forfeiting those 100 steers to Jeb, but with a twist, he donated them to feed the growing orphanage. Men who once mocked him now tipped their hats in respect. Eleanor and Harlan worked side by side, not as husband and wife, but as partners in a greater cause. The home rose from the earth, a sturdy building with classrooms, baths, and a garden where children laughed instead of labored. Sarah, the orphan girl, became the first to thrive there, her drawings of sunsets adorning the walls. Years passed, and the Wild West tamed itself a bit, but the legacy endured. Harlan, now graying at the temples, would sit by the fire with the children, telling stories not of conquests, but of compassion. "Remember," he'd say, his voice warm as the hearth, "true wealth ain't in gold or land, it's in the hearts you touch." Eleanor, ever the quiet force, watched with pride as the orphanage became a haven for hundreds. In a land of outlaws and opportunists, their act of kindness rippled outward, inspiring neighbors to give, strangers to help. And so, in the vast expanse of the American frontier, where dreams clashed with destiny, one man's frozen moment of realization thawed into a lifetime of selflessness. It reminded all who heard the tale that humanity's greatest power lies not in what we take, but in what we give. Hope, like the endless prairie, stretches far when nurtured by kind hands. Harlan Thorpe died an old man, surrounded by the family he'd built, not of blood, but of bonds forged in empathy. His story whispered on the winds, even the hardest heart can soften, and in that softening, worlds are transformed.